It is June 23rd, 2022, approximately 19:30 hours Eastern, day 120 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we're now 4 months into a war that should have only lasted 2 weeks. Now, it's been 3 weeks since the last sitrep video. The last sitrep video was day 99. I have been going full bore on my garden. That's why I have not put out a sitrep video for the past couple weeks. And I recommend, if you are not working on gardening and you have the space to do it, you should be working on it right now. And actually, when I'm done doing this video and I start the uploading, I got more things I got to put in the ground yet tonight inside the garden, because that never ends. Now, I have to do the obligatory disclaimers right off the bat. First off, I get my information from multiple sources. I get it from mainstream media, I get it from alternative media, and I get it from alternative or independent journalists on the ground. I also get information from governmental and non-governmental organizations. I also get some information off of social media from accounts that originate in Eastern Europe. Now, also I have to put out the reminder to people, I do not support Vladimir Putin and the oligarchs in charge of Russia. I do not support Zelensky and the oligarchs in charge of Ukraine. And I damn sure do not support the neo-Nazi wannabe fucking shitheads that are serving in the Ukrainian military or are in control of the Ukrainian government. Who do I support? I support the troops on the battlefield that are having to fight this on both sides. They're following orders. They don't want to. It's the way it is. And the civilians that are getting caught in the middle. My personal belief is this war should be over right the fuck now, because for the most part it's stalemated at the current moment. Reportedly it is mostly artillery duels going back and forth. That's where most of the fighting is going on, is with field artillery. Not so much troop movements on the ground per se. This war needs to end right now. Both sides need to sit down at the fucking table and must be willing to give stuff up. The Ukrainian government must recognize that the Donbass area is its own independent countries and let them be. They must also recognize that the Crimea is part of Russia, like it used to be. The Russian government needs to pull back their forces outside of the Donbass, pull them back into Russian territory and DPR territory, and the areas down here that are outside the Crimea zone that they occupied at the start of the war, they need to pull back from there too. But we all know neither side wants to give in at all. Reportedly, there is zero, I say again, zero peace negotiations going on anymore at any level, because both sides are playing the game of, no, you need to do what I want before I even listen to what you want. That is resulting into a slaughter on the ground of civilians and soldiers. Speaking of such, we are going into the casualties. UN numbers for civilian casualties as of this morning. 4,662 civilians killed so far. Wounded 5,803 so far. Okay, Russian BDA battle damage assessment. Ukraine claims they have killed 34,430 Russian troops inside Ukraine. NATO is now saying that they're thinking the number is closer to 20,000. Now for equipment, reminder for those who have not seen this before, there's one number which is claimed by the Ukrainian government and one number that is from what can be confirmed from independent sources. Ukraine claims they've destroyed 1,504 tanks. Only 789 can be confirmed. Armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles. Ukraine claims 3,632. Only 1,560 confirmed. Artillery, Ukraine claims 756, only 189 can be confirmed. Multiple launch rocket systems, Ukraine claims 240 destroyed, only 80 can be confirmed. Surface-to-air missile systems, Ukraine claims 99 destroyed, only 63 can be confirmed. Fixed-wing aircraft, Ukraine claims they've shot down 216, only 35 can be confirmed. Helicopters destroyed, Ukraine claims 183, only 48 can be confirmed. Drones, Ukraine claims they've shot down 620, only 88 can be confirmed. Ships, Ukraine claims they've sunk 14, only 10 can be confirmed. And I expect that number to go up because NATO has recently delivered Harpoon missiles, anti-ship missiles, to Ukraine, and Ukraine is pushing them to the Black Sea right now. The idiots are actually posting it on social media that they're getting the missiles in position to go after Russian ships. No, that won't end badly for the Ukrainians. Trucks. Ukraine claims they've destroyed 2,548, only 1,184 can be confirmed. Also a note here, the British Ministry of Defense is claiming that DPR forces have suffered approximately 55% losses of the troops and equipment that they had in service on the first day of the war. This does not take into account people who have gone into the military and equipment that was passed off to them from the Russians that was captured from Ukraine. Okay, Ukrainian battle damage assessment. Ukraine claims they've lost only 10,000 troops since the start of the war. Russia claims they've killed 23,367 Ukrainian soldiers. Both numbers, I think, are very low of what the actual Ukrainian killed in action actually is. Because the talk is right now that Ukraine is losing at least 1,000 people per day in the fighting in the Donbass. So that number should be vastly larger than what either side is claiming on it. Okay, Ukrainian equipment lost. Russia has not put out any recent numbers, so this is just the numbers that can be confirmed from independent sources, such as photographs and video evidence. Tanks, 198 destroyed. APCs, IFVs, 410 destroyed. Artillery, 76 destroyed. Multiple launch rocket systems, 19 destroyed. SAM systems, 44 destroyed. Fixed-wing aircraft, 28 shot down. Helicopters, 11 shot down. Drones, 23 shot down. And I know that's on a low end because of the number of drones the Ukrainian military is employing. Ships, 18 sunk. Trucks, 301 destroyed. And I think those numbers are probably about maybe 25% of what they've actually lost. That they've had considerable losses of equipment that's being covered up. Now, before we get into on the battlefield and the belligerents, I want to point you guys in a direction of two documentaries I really think you should look at and keep an open mind when you watch these. These documentaries cannot be posted over at YouTube. I cannot even say their names without this video being taken down for strikes. But I will put links to them in the description and in a pinned comment. One documentary is from 2016, and that will be the title I will have with it, along with the address. The other documentary is from 2019. I suggest you watch them, and personally, after I watched them, I think the person that did the documentary, they were just barely scraping the surface of what was actually going on in Ukraine at that time. Hindsight is 2020. Now, on the battlefield, around Kharkov. Russian forces are counterattacking and they're pushing back the Ukrainian forces. I do not have a frontline trace as to where the front lines currently sit, but reportedly as of this morning, Russian artillery is back within firing range of Kharkov itself. So they have pushed forward quite a bit from the border. Down in the Crimea, the only information I have for down there is the Ukrainian government is telling civilians to depopulate the area before the Ukrainian army advances to make it easier for their troops to move forward. And I can tell you that the Ukrainian military has been shelling the hell out of civilian villages in that area, probably to entice them to leave. Over in the Donbass, that's where most of the action is going on. Okay, Russian forces have now captured pretty much all of Severodonetsk. Reportedly, the last defenders from the Ukrainian military are holed up at the Azot chemical plant in the underground tunnel and bunker system there. And they are currently holding between 500 and 590 civilians. I do not know if they're there willingly or if these are being held as hostages like the Azovs did down in Mariupol when they got caught in the Azov stall. Reportedly in the Donbass region, the Russian military is encircling entire Ukrainian units up to brigade size. Those units, before the encirclement ends, well, if the troops are smart, they're breaking and they're leaving the pocket as fast as they can. The troops that are left behind either have to surrender or they get annihilated. And there are reports of entire battalions where the battalion staff, everyone, fled the area, ran away, left the ground troops behind in the trenches, didn't let them know they were being encircled. And once they are completely cut off from the Russian forces, that's when they found out they were left behind. Some of those units are fighting to the death. A lot of them are surrendering en masse. You're seeing surrenders of between 1,000 to 2,000 troops happening in a shot every few days is what I'm finding in social media out of Eastern Europe, out of Ukraine and Russia. Now, belligerents on the battlefield. Start off with Russia. Nicaragua is allowing Russia to station 230 troops inside their country for officially for training purposes. They're going to have a base down there. The U.S. government condemned the action, and some members of the Nicaraguan government have been sanctioned. Not officially because of letting Russian troops in. They're sanctioning them for other excuses that they can think of. Because they don't want people to find out about that. That's not being reported in the mainstream media. Russia is issuing passports to anyone that wants them inside the areas they control. And no, this is not the current front lines. This is from over a month ago. I do not have the current map. But a Ukrainian citizen can go in, if they so choose, to the governmental offices in their area, turn in their Ukrainian passport, and they will get issued a Russian passport. This is being documented primarily down in this area of the country. And reportedly it is going on in the Donetsk, in areas being secured there too by DPR forces. Okay, down around Kherson, a Ukrainian militia battalion commander, the Territorial Defense Battalion down there, the commanding officer defected to the Russian forces. He stated the reason for it is the Ukrainian Army is targeting civilians in the area instead of the Russian troop and equipment concentrations that they are reporting to the Ukrainian Army. And there is evidence that the HIMARS launchers that the U.S. sent to Ukraine are being employed against civilian targets in eastern Ukraine, down around Kherson, and it sounds like there might have been an incident up in Donetsk. Officially, we've sent 4 launchers so far, but it's kind of looking like we fudged a number and we actually sent a lot more than 4 HIMARS to Ukraine. But, yeah, the targeting of civilians by the Ukrainian Army instead of the targeting of Russian troop concentrations is actually causing the local Ukrainian militia to question what side they should be on. If their family's getting targeted by the Ukrainian military, why should they be fighting for the Ukrainian military? Russia reportedly is targeting weapons depots that are filling up with equipment from NATO. Reportedly, one of the things that got hit was a tank depot up around Kiev, which was filled with brand new used T-72s that came in from Poland. Apparently Russia launched some cruise missiles at that depot and destroyed a lot of shit. Okay, outside of Ukraine, Russia is demanding that Lithuania end its blockade of the Russian base in Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is the home of the Russian Baltic Fleet. It is a major Russian military base with approximately 1,000 people, civilians and military, living there. Lithuania is blocking approximately 50% of the food and supplies going to the base. The Lithuanian government says that they are only enforcing European Union sanctions against Russia. Citizens in Lithuania are stockpiling food and supplies because they are expecting that they're going to get attacked by Russia because of what their government is doing. Okay, we got some things here that made my blood boil because it is hypocrisy to the nth degree. In Donetsk, there is evidence, actual proof, that the Ukrainian army is using cluster munitions against civilians. There is video footage of this. You can go over to my Patreon. I linked to the stuff over there. There's a video report from Patrick Lancaster showing a cluster munition dispenser from a BM-27 rocket launcher that was fired into a city of civilians. There is no military targets in that city, that town. So they knowingly fired cluster munitions into a civilian area. And apparently this is not the first time this has happened, not even since the war has began. And I want to point out, where the hell is the international outrage over this? Do people forget the first couple weeks of the war when there was just the hint that the Russians might be using cluster munitions on the battlefield? There was international condemnation over it, and people were screaming everywhere that Putin was a war criminal who should be, you know, special forces should be going in there, grabbing him, hauling him out, and holding him in custody until an international war crimes tribunal could be put into place. Where the fuck is the outrage from the international media when you have actual physical evidence that the Ukrainian military is using cluster munitions against civilians? Now, it gets better on that. We also have in Donetsk, and I'll try to pronounce this city as best I can here, Veshneskovo, Veshneveskovo. Well, inside this town, there is an active maternity hospital. Women were actually giving birth in there at the time, as the Ukrainian military shelled that hospital 3 times in under 24 hours. Direct hits were scored on the hospital building itself, while it was filled with pregnant women and women who had recently given birth, and the staff and family members of the women that were in this hospital. Where is the international outrage over this one? Because remember, you had in Mariupol, the maternity hospital there that the Azovs took over, kicked out all the pregnant women and the staff, turned it into their battalion headquarters and a barracks. The Russians hit it because it was a legitimate military target, because there were no civilians inside. It was Azovs, it was military members of Ukraine using that as a military facility. Well, when the Russians hit that building, there was all the international outcry, and people actually condemned me. There is some fucking so-called internet watch group that said I'm spreading misinformation about the war in Ukraine because I pointed out that people that in Mariupol reported that that building was being used by the Ukrainian military, in particular the Azov battalion. Where the fuck is the international outrage over a building literally filled with pregnant women being targeted not once, not twice, but 3 separate artillery strikes, 3 separate barrages against this hospital filled with pregnant women? Where the fuck is the international outrage over that one? Where? I want to fucking know. You want to say that you support women, you know, and the stuff that the Russian army did, hitting that hospital, was a war crime, even if it was being used by the military? Here you got a building, there was no troops inside, and they fucking hit it. Where the hell is the international outcry over that? Where the hell is the talk about international tribunals being set up to investigate what unit did that? Because this happened less than 24 hours ago. Or it happened within the last week for sure. But I think this one happened within 24 hours. Okay, reportedly, there was talk in the media about some type of proposed peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. A spokesman for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, was asked about this. His response back said they knew nothing about this because this is not an official agreement. This is just something that's being pushed in the media. And he said that Russia has issued demands to Ukraine that must be met before a peace agreement can occur. When questioned about what those demands were, Peskov said that the Ukrainian government knows full well what they are because they had already been delivered to the Ukrainian government. If I had to guess, it's probably the same thing since the beginning of the war, that Ukraine must be neutral, they must demilitarize, they must recognize that Crimea is Russian territory and that the Donbass is its own separate country. And they must agree not to join NATO. That's just my guess as to what those demands are. Now, for Ukraine. Ukraine is reporting that they are at a huge firepower disadvantage in the fighting in eastern Ukraine. They have only 1 artillery and rocket launcher for every 10 to 20 that the Russian army has in the area. And the Russian military also has far larger stocks of ammunition for their launchers. The Ukrainian government is demanding that NATO immediately send them at least 1,000 artillery pieces and 300 MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, and an additional 500 main battle tanks. And this must be done right now. The U.S. did send 4 HIMARS launchers, and it came out today. It is official. They are sending more. Yes, we are sending even more HIMARS launchers into Ukraine officially as of this morning. Okay, the IMF now estimates that the Ukrainian economy will shrink by over 35% this year, while Russia's will only shrink 8.5% because of the sanctions. So Ukraine is, being downgraded to a never going to be able to pay off the loan status. The Ukrainian parliament has, over this last week, replaced that. They voted on and placed severe restrictions on books and music from Russian authors. They declare a person to be a Russian author if they lived outside of Ukraine after 1991. This also bans any cultural imports from Russia and Belarus. In order for these Russian authors and artists to get their material to be legal inside Ukraine, they have to renounce the Russian government, turn over their passports, and renounce their citizenship of Russia and become official Ukrainian citizens. And it kind of sounds like the way it's worded is even if they are a Ukrainian citizen and lived outside of Russia after 1991, they're still looked at as being a Russian citizen and they're banned under the law. Yeah, that really shows democracy, doesn't it? Trust me, it only gets better. Also, a few days ago, the Ukrainian government officially banned and seized all the assets of the main opposition party against Zelensky. The name of the party is Opposition Platform for Life. They went in, banned the platform, banned the party, seized their assets, and arrested members of the Opposition Platform for Life and jailed them. 10 other opposition parties to Zelensky have already been banned since the start of the war. Now, reportedly, Ukrainian police are hunting down members of these banned parties, beating them to within an inch of their life, arresting them, and hauling them off to jail. Not all of them reach the jail. Some of them become casualties killed by Russian forces in the statistics. Yeah, a real democratic country, ain't it? Fucking idiots. There are reports that 2 to 3 U.S. military veterans have been captured by Russian forces over the last 30 days. 2 of them for sure were captured up around Kharkov. Another one was reportedly captured this morning. There is talk that they will likely be tried, and if or when they are found guilty, they will be executed. Now, I want to point out on this. The Russian military is declaring them to be mercenaries, not members of the Ukrainian military. And the Ukrainian Army itself does not recognize the foreign volunteers as being members of the Ukrainian Army. They do not recognize them as being part of the Ukrainian military, period. So, they have no protections under the Geneva Convention for troops that would be captured on the battlefield. To put this in context, think of this as being the same as U.S. forces capturing foreigners on the battlefield in Iraq or Afghanistan. These foreigners are other countries outside the battle area, so they're not Iraqi, they're not Afghan. When we would capture them, they were classified as terrorists. Well, the Russians are essentially doing the same thing. And instead of sending them to Gitmo, the Russians are shooting them after they're being tried. And let's keep in mind that these military veterans, these U.S. citizens, went to a foreign country to kill foreign soldiers. So the Russian military can look at them as being murderers because they're not officially part of the Ukrainian military. And what do you do to murderers? I know in the United States we put them in jail for a very long time. Other parts of the world has other ways of dealing with murderers. Okay, on to a different subject. The Panzerhaube 2000s have now arrived in Ukraine with crews trained from inside Germany. And Ukraine has made a big spectacle of the event of these Panzerhaube 2000s arriving in country. And I fully expect them to be destroyed within a week. When you put a lot of emphasis on something, on how much of a battle change on the battlefield it is, guess what? Your enemy's going to fucking target it. Just like Ukraine did with those T-90Ms that were sent in by Russia, the T-90 M3s that were destroyed up around Kharkov. It's going to be the same thing for the HIMAR launchers and the Panzerhaube 2000s and the French César artillery systems they've been sending in. Okay, for those of you that missed this because it wasn't in the mainstream news, 2 weeks ago, a Ukrainian government official admitted she lied to Western governments about Russian troops committing atrocities, in particular mass rapes in the country. She knowingly did it in order to get support from those countries and to get weapons for Ukraine. How come we're not talking about that in the media, huh? Oh, it's because, yeah, that's right. The Ukrainian government can walk on water. They're holier than everyone. There are reports that the Ukrainian Army is reportedly shelling the Donex region harder than they ever have over the last 8 years. This war has been going on since 2014 in that area. And reportedly, most of the shelling is being directed against civilians, and the civilians in the area have no idea why. They are being targeted. Okay. Now let's go on to NATO. Okay, polls inside the European Union have now showed a massive shift in people's perception about the war in Ukraine. They want immediate peace in Ukraine, even if it means giving concessions to Russia. They cite their reasoning for this, the worsening economic conditions inside the European Union. Because remember, the collapse of the world economy is being blamed on Russia and the war in Ukraine, so they want the war over with because they're tired of paying so much at the gas pump and paying so much for food. Okay, the United States Department of Justice is reportedly sending our top Nazi hunter, quote unquote, to investigate war crimes in Ukraine. His name is Eli Rosenbaum. He's a 36-year Department of Justice veteran who, before his appointment to investigate war crimes in Ukraine, his main job over the last few years has been tracking the assets of Russian oligarchs so that it can be seized by the U.S. government. Yeah, there's not going to be a conflict of interest or anything there. You know, it's not like this guy who's been trying to seize Russian assets, you know, is going to come out and say that, you know, anyone other than Russia has committed war crimes. Okay, reportedly, Spain is considering sending worn-out Leopard 2A4s to Ukraine. These were reportedly pulled from service years ago and have been sitting in storage. Originally, they were going to be sending about a battalion's worth, around 40 Leopard 2A4s. This number has been dropped down to 8 to 10. And it sounds like these Leopard 2s are basically only good for parts. They are just too far gone. Okay, I can get to that one yet. Okay, this came out this morning. The Commanding General of the British Royal Army, General Sir Patrick Sanders, reportedly told his troops that they need to prepare for fighting Russians because they will be declaring war against Russia very, very soon. Yeah, let that one sink in. There's also reports here that NATO is now under active consideration that this is going to be implemented. They're going to be expanding the Rapid Response Force from 40,000 to 240,000 troops that will be on alert at all times, citing the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This just came out a few hours ago here. The United States will be sending an additional $450 million in military aid to Ukraine. Included in this is at least 4 more HIMARS launchers, and I say at least because I think they're slipping extras into the shipment without telling anyone. They're also sending 36,000 105mm artillery shells, 18 vehicles for the purpose of towing artillery, 1,200 grenade launchers, an additional 2,000 machine guns of unspecified type, 18 patrol boats, and spare parts for the equipment that we've already sent. Okay, and then I got a couple stories here that link together. A journalist in Germany, Wolfram Weimar, broke down and admitted in a live broadcast on air that Russia is winning in Ukraine and will win the war. He cites that the Russian economy is improving with more major deals all the time with China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and others. The Russian ruble, it is at a 5-year high in the monetary markets. It is seriously beating the US dollar. He also cited during his breakdown that the Russian military is advancing in eastern Ukraine, but the media in the West is deliberately covering up these wins by the Russian forces. He said that the West is only prolonging the inevitable. Can only guess what happened to that reporter at the end of that broadcast. I'm willing to bet he doesn't have a job anymore, and because it happened in Germany, I wouldn't doubt he got arrested. Because Germany's been doing that to people that have been reporting that type of information. Now, here in the United States, and I know I got it written down. Here it is. Colonel Douglas McGregor, retired, a former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense under Trump, was on the Judge Napolitano show. And he said that Ukraine has already lost and that we are only doubling down to try to prolong the inevitable. He said that Russia controls 25 to 30% of the country of Ukraine now, and the areas they control is responsible for at least 80% of the Ukrainian gross national product. That includes anything in manufacturing and in farming. He also says Ukrainians are losing at least 500 to 1,000 troops per day killed in action and wounded in action. He said that to him and what he's hearing, the goal of what's going on in Ukraine is to get the United States in an active war with Russia. And that is the only reason we are prolonging the inevitable. But I would put in there too that I think the reason so many governments in the West keep sending stuff into Ukraine is to make sure that certain information doesn't come out. Information that might back up things like, Hunter Biden's laptop, and all the stories about corruption and bribery to Western officials from companies inside Ukraine. I guess, and I've heard this over the past couple weeks here, there's a lot more people now starting to really wonder on the economic aid, the multiple billions of dollars that have been sent to Ukraine, how much of that has actually been used and how much of that was funneled back to the politicians in the West under the table through bribes and corruption in order to guarantee more stuff flows to Ukraine, especially weapons and munitions. There's a lot more people talking about that, the so-called experts and stuff that are appearing on programs. And I'm hearing a lot more independent observers saying the same thing. They're wondering how much of that money ended up in the pockets of corrupt politicians in Ukraine and how much of it was cycled back to politicians in the West. And we already know the Ukrainian military has been selling a decent percentage of the munitions and equipment we've been sending them. They've been selling it on the international arms market because they've been caught doing it time and time again. I've said before, the economic system of Ukraine is corruption. Far worse than it is inside Russia is the way it looks. That's all I got. I do not know when the next update on Ukrainian war will occur. Reportedly, the battlefield itself, it is going very badly for the Ukrainian Army in eastern Ukraine. Their units are being cut off one by one and annihilated. And it's turning into just a giant artillery duel back and forth. So, that's all I got. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, essayons.